A fun one today. We're going to do existential logicism versus name that trait. Name that trait essentially in some ways says the same thing existential logicism says, that the humans are animals and thus there's not an arbitrary cutoff or trait that we can assign. And that's what we'll be exploring today. But I think name that trait misses a little bit and becomes self-defeating. I think it implodes on itself. And the problem is, if we don't make airtight arguments, people are just going to say, oh, it's a bad argument, and they'll never feel any need to change at all whatsoever. And everyone's picking and choosing in society where their lines are morally, the things they will and will not accept. And so this isn't a lecture about veganism and how you or me or anyone else should be vegan. What this video is using the idea of veganism to explain how things like the spectrum of consciousness, deterministic morality, and the epistemic refutation paradox are working in everyday life, okay? So like the other one I did on moral realism, it's less of like a critique of their systems and more of just a way to apply existential logicism in a way that helps people understand it in a deeper sense. Because I did my best in the book, but you know, there's always room to improve, and obviously and just keep growing and growing and growing. And by doing stuff like this, that's how I make the next edition even more airtight and clear. Because you know, that's the main key. Like, you can have all the truth you want in, but if it's not clear and people don't get it, you know, inherently, then you're not going to get any change. So here we go. We're also going to be using the contingency guillotine, which proves morality cannot be objective because it's dependent on minds to interpret it. Okay, check out Existential Logicism, the full book, where that's explained also. But here we go. Experience equals being. That's I. So a little experience equals little I. Now, just so we understand why experience is the foundation real quick, even if we're all hallucinating what reality is, even if Descartes' demon is real, and 2 + 2 doesn't equal 4, if everyone on the planet agrees it equals 4, because that's what everyone on the planet's measurements show, then that's our reality, okay? Existential logicism doesn't care if we can ever have perfect truth. What we care about is, are the rational people agreeing on objective facts? Okay, and like, you can unpack that all day, I understand, but the idea is we operate in the reality we can know, not perfect truth, because that's how you live your everyday life. You don't operate on perfect truth, okay? You live your everyday life based on expectations, based on past experiences. You know 2 + 2 equals 4 because you have experienced it equaling 4 and never equaling anything else. That's why you believe it. Not just because it's some objective truth in the universe that's deep inside your body. No, it's your experience that tells you what we call objective facts are. All right? So, now that we understand that, and so that would mean our inner subjective experience is the way that we know things, okay? Now, emergent, when we're talking about consciousness, is not magic. Emergent is not the ether. Emergent is not a spirit. Emergent means we can no longer calculate or conceptualize a system as independent interactions. The thing grows by orders of magnitude the more interactions you have, because they're all capable of interacting with each other. It's a wave now, and reaction in a system follow from waves of decisions, okay? Waves of experiences. Intermingled sets of causes, not singular ones. No more one-to-one interaction tells you what's going on. It tells you something. Any particular one-to-one can tell you something, but it can't tell you everything about the system anymore. Think particles in a room. If one particle and another particle are in a room and it bounces, you can track those all around till they bounce into each other again. The more particles you put in, what you get is trends. So if you filled the room, what you would have is waves of particles moving in ways that would follow certain trends, okay? That's an emergent property. It's not new special particles or new forces or magic. It's emergent. It's emergent from the baser system because those base parts are now operating in an interconnected way. Again, I apologize. I'm tired, so we got to get this. We got to get this video done though. So we're gonna do it tonight. That's why the lighting's like this. I usually try to get some sunlight in. I wasn't able to do that. We got to do this now. So here we go. Humans are animals. All beings on Earth form under the same similar pressures. No experience. No, I'm sorry. So experience varies in degree, not fundamental nature. Okay? We have more complex intelligence than animals. Our primitive feelings and experiences are based in a larger number of factors. But the base primitive experience is still the same for all experiencing beings. How much they're experiencing, again, big experience, big I, little experience, little I. So the question is how much? This is a spectrum. That's how, so we got, those are questions that we're not going to answer here today, who's where on the spectrum, but the idea is that, okay, because we're animals, so because we're animals, also, you don't arbitrarily split us. You say all animals developed on Earth. We obviously have different factors, but we still developed on Earth under many of the same similar pressures. So that's the idea. We're all animals. Our experiences develop the same way. Sorry if I'm being repetitive. More intelligence equals more experiences are possible. Meaning, a being that's having a small amount of experience may not be able to access these intermingled, interconnected things that they feel. But they'll still feel fear. They'll still run. And we could call that a reaction. But what I'm saying is at the end of the day, all of your complex and extra intelligent human layers boil down to primitive experiences. We're still animals. Okay, it's the way we've classified intelligence where we've prioritized complexity and not depth of experience. Okay, you could imagine a world where we developed completely different and everything was about maximizing the depth of the experiences of the creatures around us, and we would view animals in a very different way, okay? It's just, and I say that to point out that things could have happened differently. Evolution doesn't give you perfect outcomes. It gives you whatever outcomes you got, depending on whatever circumstances we're pressuring, any given system. Okay, you could say the same thing about the economy. It wasn't built just overnight, top down. It evolved over time. Anyways, so humans are generally the most intelligent. So they have essentially every experience that we can find everywhere else in nature. Human emotion equals, let me touch on this first. So that means that because we're the most intelligent, we have access to the most experiences. So you can use us as a bar and say, oh, humans feel this. Let's look in nature and see if that's happening somewhere. And for most things, we can find it in nature. And all of the important ones, we definitely can find in nature, okay? So now, human emotion equals animal emotion because humans are animals. Animal emotion equals a spectrum of experience. And a spectrum of experience equals a spectrum of consciousness. The spectrum of consciousness says no arbitrary trait cutoff. Morals arise from deterministic moral forces, not moral laws, and not objective trait cutoffs. Deterministic moral forces are societal and evolutionary factors acting upon experiencing beings, okay? And then here we have what I'm talking about. You don't have a spectrum of consciousness where it's humans as the most intelligent and all human emotions at the top. And then you got dolphins next, and then dogs, and so on and so forth. Squirrel, spider, and it's all of their experiences in a line. No. The spectrum of consciousness says we're all animals. We experience primitive, and we're using primitive as a as sort of as a stand-in word here. I don't know that it's the most perfect word, but we're experiencing and accessing these same primitive experiences, okay? Because we all develop under similar pressures. So it's not all human emotion at the top and then dolphins and, oh, who's the next intelligent? The question is, what things are you experiencing and what's the depth of experience? And that can tell you something about the depth of intelligence. Because, you know, the human is the wide spectrum and we're capable of focusing in. That's why we're so special, is we have this highly complex level of intelligence. But I think the lens we view it through makes it harder for us to understand the world around us. And I think in a lot of ways we're coming around because observations are backing all this stuff up. But, you know, we got to start having these conversations here because we know this stuff to be true, I think. Complexity and scale are the bar, not species. We all run from the bear. Okay, here's an example. Me, a deer, and a rabbit are in the woods. A grizzly bear is coming to kill us. We all run. I can just list more reasons I want to live. But if you think that rabbit and that deer ain't scared, then you've probably never been around rabbits or deer that much. Okay? I can just list more reasons I want to live. But does complexity automatically equal moral weight? And does complexity automatically trigger a moral contract and social duty to not harm less complex beings? Okay? So the question is, if we're all animals and everything's on a spectrum, and we don't hold dolphins morally accountable, and we don't hold dogs morally accountable, even though you can teach a dog not to kill things that it normally instinctually would want to kill, you understand? The question is, how, if there's no arbitrary cutoff, do we trigger a moral contract in people? If we're animals, then what makes a hunter any different than a cat that's playing with the mouse? Do you say that cat's immoral, or do you say that's a primitive instinct? I'm saying just because people are more complex doesn't mean they inherently understand things. You can be completely wrong about everything and have a totally fucked up moral compass, just like a cat. You understand? But I'm saying it's not a fucked up moral compass, and we'll get to why. We're going to explain it. So, existential logicism says there's no cutoff or moral contract switch. Morals are a byproduct of societal norms developed in many ways, okay? And at the end of the day, we don't eat humans for the same reason we pick and choose what animals to eat. If you live in certain countries, you eat certain animals, and if you live in other countries, you don't eat them, okay? And that is in large part because you have assigned arbitrary weight to beings that exhibit close similarity in experiences to humans in many or even a single highly scaled way, okay? If you see animals having primitive experiences, your dog loving you like with all its heart, that makes you think you shouldn't kill it because you're relating to it on that level, okay? And the thing is, and so name that trait says, well, what makes it okay? What would make it okay for you to eat a person or to you know, I'm not going to use certain terminology he uses just because anyway, but what would make it wrong to harm a person the same way you harm animals? And the facts are that what would make it wrong is this identification with primitive experiences. Because if you go to war, what do you do? You disassociate the person on the other side. You say bad, they want to kill me, so you disassociate them. My point is, we don't just do this to animals. What Name That Trait is saying, why do we do this thing to animals we don't do to humans? What existential logicism is saying, we do it to people. And if we understand why we do it to people and animals, then if we want to make change, we can. Okay? I'm not here to make any more prescriptions today. I'm here to describe reality for you, okay? And why societies go bad when we become completely indifferent morally, okay? And we'll get to all that. But we don't eat humans for the same reason we pick and choose what animals to eat, based on identifying with primitive experiences. Morals cannot be objective. See the contingency guillotine if you're unsure about that. Further proving this can only be a subjective overlay. Okay? There's no objective moral law. This is proven now. Okay? So this can only be a subjective overlay. And if we're animals and there's no trait, then the question is, why can't a person, or what triggers some type of a moral contract for a person to treat an animal different than another animal treats another animal? Okay, why are you saying a human is immoral if they play with their prey, but you're not saying a cat is immoral? Okay, we're saying it's probably not good. Existential Logicism's opinion on it is it's probably not good if the mouse is suffering, that it's suffering, and it's not good if a human's suffering. Okay, it's not good. The question is, what can we do to have the least suffering? Okay, like we're ultimately coming to the same conclusion as many other people before, but we want to get to reality so that we can affect real change. Anyways, so existential logicism rejects human exceptionalism. We're animals. We reject it because it clouds our ability to understand the world, all right? And make change based in reality. That's what I was just saying. Okay, name that trait seems to be saying complexity and intelligence is worth more. The complexity and intelligence assigns us some kind of moral weight. But without a trait or an objective moral law, what is your arbitrary cutoff? And once you name an arbitrary cutoff, now you've elevated humans above animals, and again, you're just making like you're making prescriptions based on your opinions at that point. Which we can agree, I would agree, yeah, we want less suffering, but that's not going to move anybody because you have to have rock solid arguments to move people. Anyway, existential logicism rejects this because it falls back to some type of species identifier, not some moral bar. It ultimately just falls back to, I'm identifying with this thing for some reason, so it's wrong to kill it. Complexity eventually reaches a, yeah, so, and it's saying like that essentially, if intelligence is just more complex experience, then you're saying at some point that complexity triggers a moral contract where I now have to like not do certain things to other animals that I wouldn't do to people. No. We're saying the same thing applies to animals and people. And that being indifferent to animal suffering is bad for society for reasons we'll get to later. My dogs are trying to get in here, but I need room to walk around, so no. Okay, here we go. The difference between a cat playing with a mouse and a hunter is what? Either both are wrong, or either both are wrong or neither. If you name that trait to its natural conclusions, then you have to say some animals do learn and understand moral weight, okay? Morality is not an objective thing that we can just point to. Morality is the pressure something feels inside to not do a bad thing, okay? So when you teach a dog not to kill your cat and they get along and stuff, that's learning morality. Anything that you, like anytime you're going against your quote unquote animal instinct to not do something, that's moral weight. You're feeling a duty to not violate some moral contract you feel. And why do you feel that? Because of experiential identifiers. Okay? And this, we know this is true because we don't just harm animals. We classify and harm people the same way. But again, we'll get to that. Anyway, so what's the difference between the cat and the hunter? Both animals. No objective morality and no arbitrary cutoff. So how do we say that? How do we say there's a difference? And some humans never do understand. Some humans will never ever even understand this shit. Existential logicism says that the hunter leads to trophy hunting, aka not necessary hunting, You know, like this is like just a little chain you could go through to say, oh, why hunting may be bad, okay? Leads to trophy hunting and a mentality of justifying needless killing. So it's not that, oh, it's so bad, like you're morally objectively wrong for hunting a deer. And then it's even worse if you're only hunting it for antlers, because either case you didn't have to hunt the deer. You could have ate vegetables or went to the grocery store or whatever. And that leads to the idea that it's okay if we can justify it to do this needless killing of an experiential being, okay? It leads to a false moral bar that allows others to hide in incremental ignorance. So you can just move that bar up and down wherever you want arbitrarily, and that's what people do. Okay, so the idea is if we don't view all experiencing beings on a spectrum of consciousness, then what we do is we allow ourselves to do things to them that we wouldn't do to people or other. Like the guy who's hunting the deer is not going to go hunt dogs, right? Not most of the time. And so it's like, because he's got these experiential identifiers with the dog, but he doesn't understand how the deer works, so he thinks it's just a dumb fucking on-off switch type system. You understand? It's about understanding experience. If the hunter never understands it, how's he different than the cat? Because what you are is nature and nurture. So the cat is mostly nature. That's why it doesn't understand morality. A human is mostly nurture. But if neither one can fundamentally understand it, aka feel moral weight, aka feel a duty to change and do anything about it, then isn't it the same thing? It's an animal that doesn't get it. You understand? We can't assign arbitrary moral weight. All right? So, incremental ignorance, eventually leading to indifference to certain types of primitive experiences. So we say, oh, the deer might be scared and might have a family and might want to do things in life, but it's not like complicated like me. Like I want to drive a car and go to work and shit and then have kids and take care of my kids. Stupid deer just wants to take care of kids. It doesn't care about stocks or what TV shows coming on. Like it's a weird way that we like I get it. We're more complex. We have more access to more experiences and more emotions. But is complexity better? I don't know. I really don't. Like, I mean, have you seen the video of the deer seeing its little baby swimming out in the water, and then a huge alligator's coming to get the baby? The mama deer runs out right in front of the alligator, so the alligator eats it, and the mom's looking at the baby. Now, do I know that's as complicated and as deep as a human experience of parental love? No. But do I think that most parents would jump in front of a fucking moving truck to save their kid? I would hope so, but wouldn't that be like the ultimate sign of depth and that you care? Like, so I'm just asking, like, are we identifying intelligence in an honest way, or are we just being human exceptionalists? Okay? So, certain types of primitive experience. And if we allow that in animals, eventually we allow more human harm due to faulty moral compass, okay? Perception the cat doesn't break society by messing up the mice. See, we don't say the cat is immoral because it's playing with the prey, but we do say that people are immoral for killing each other because it breaks down society. If you go around killing dogs and you're indifferent to dogs, well, society feels different about that. And so it causes this type of collapse. And you'll get a response from people who feel the duty to protect dogs. You understand? The things that we feel like are gonna hurt society, those are the things we go against. And the things that we're fine with, that we don't think are gonna destroy society, we don't feel any moral duty to correct. Okay? And so that's the thing. You got to start getting people to ask the question, do we have a moral duty to correct factory farming? And really just the whole way that we just, like, everything's built on driving you to consume and overconsume. And that's not good. And if we don't ever wake up to the fact that this is happening, then how can we change? And you ain't never going to save everybody, but you can wake up some people. You know what I'm saying? That's worth something. Anyway. Arbitrary species distinction. So basically, and we'll close up the left side here by just saying we're getting rid of arbitrary species distinction. We're saying humans are animals. We have the most depth of experiences and emotions, and the most broad access. Depth may not be the right word here because we don't actually know that, I don't think. But we have the most complicated intelligence. And for us, we say that means we identify experientially with more beings, and that creates a moral duty to treat those beings a certain way. Name that trait. What trait is true of animals that if true of humans would justify killing for food? Essentially, okay? Existential logicism says none. There's not a trait that would be an arbitrary distinction that we don't make in existential logicism. So we agree. And how would you say justify? Justify in what way? Humans are animals. Morals are subjective. Okay? Animals are experiencing beings. Humans are animals. You can't logically be coherent and say there's a trait that separates animals from other animals. Unless you say complexity is the trait, and that's a cop-out, okay? Spectrum of consciousness agrees here. Experience differs in degree, not fundamental structure. There's no trait, okay? We all develop under the same types of pressures. We have the same primitive experiences. It just changes in complexity and scale and depth, okay? That's the reason indifference to suffering animals in society leads to societies more capable of atrocities toward people. Because without a defining trait, then it's totally subjective, meaning one's ability to tolerate injustice through subjective classification is only constrained by one's imagination, okay? By saying that there's no trait, because there's no trait, if we don't identify something, if we don't identify just something that says, okay, just in general experiencing beings are accessing a spectrum of consciousness, and it's generally not good to harm them in certain ways. And you start with people and you say we shouldn't harm any people in that way, and that's the obvious one, we don't want to go to war, blah, 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 blah. But there's no societal pressure to stop those things. I mean, we get dragged into every war, and it's not just America, it's the whole world. Like, we're controlled in this way. Because we claim these objective morals, but then there's really nothing there to grab onto, it just allows people to do whatever the fuck they want. There's no actual driver that's saying, okay, what should society look like? I mean, society should really look like all your basic stuff is damn near free. There's plenty of land to go around, and we can have robots. Like, the idea shouldn't be robots are doing art and all this crap so we can work. The idea is the robots should be doing work so that we can do art and stuff. We will never, ever get there on the path we're on. There has to be a change. And that's why we're using this as an example. Now, again, this isn't a lecture about veganism. This is just showing you how deterministic moral forces kind of work in society. Okay, we say we make these identifiers, and it changes the way societies feel about all experiencing beings. Okay, and that means if you can understand the cat or the squirrel has feelings and emotions, and then on some level those are worth respecting, then when you see the guy, the homeless guy, maybe you'll feel something more then. Like, you got to understand deterministic moral forces, the life you were born into. Like, if the homeless guy on the street could have it perfect, you think he'd be homeless, or would he be in love and have money and a good job and have grown up in a good family? Like, there will always be outliers and people who are mentally broken and psychopaths and stuff. But in general, nobody's choosing their shitty situation, because we are systems, and systems evolve, and they don't evolve for the best outcome. They evolve to survive whatever's happening, on whatever regular pressures are imposing on it. Anyways, let's move on. So existential logicism's fundamental disagreement with name that trait, okay, is if people are animals and there's no singular trait or binary on-off, then you can't oblige humans in general to enter a moral contract that creates the obligation to act different than other animals. Okay? Unless you're just going to say complexity and intelligence means we have to protect other animals, but then you have to say the cat's immoral because it's smarter than the mouse it's playing with. Okay? And given enough effort, you can teach, and whether cat's the perfect example, I don't know. But there's animals you could teach some level of moral weight to, okay? And so that's the question. If we can teach other animals moral weight, but we're not going to hold them morally responsible, how are you holding an ignorant person morally responsible? It would be great if everybody felt some pressure to try to respect the world around them more. But if you're a cat or a dog and you don't understand that, or you're a person and you just don't understand that for more complicated reasons, then how are you different if you're both just animals, okay? Anyways, so if no trait exists, any human who... Okay, I gotta let these dogs up in here. Come on, Stinky, go, 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 go. Move, move, move. Go, Ghost. Alright, you can play outside. Excuse me, baby girl. Okay, so I'm sorry. Acting an animal. So if no trait exists, any human who doesn't agree or fundamentally can't understand because of nature or nurture, they would be dismissed from the moral contract just like a cat. Because the idea is intelligence and complexity is manifesting this moral contract. But guess what? Complexity doesn't equal different primitive experience. It's just a more complicated way to get to the same thing. Not understand the average human. Oh, we'll get to that. I'm sorry, I almost jumped ahead. Okay. Humans' inability to understand isn't different in principle. It's just more complicated because no single on-off trait exists. So you would have to then assert arbitrarily what traits do and don't initiate the conditions to entail a moral contract. Name that trait says there's no arbitrary trait we can name. And then the question becomes, I agree. So how are you initiating this contract with these fucking animals? Okay? Name that trait. I agree, there's no arbitrary trait. So how are you now getting a monkey into a moral contract? That's my question. Okay? Now, no on-off trait, you would have to then arbitrarily assert what trait due to a moral contract, which isn't proof, it's just pure opinion. That's the problem. Is you're saying, no, these more complicated monkeys have moral weight, these other ones don't. And eventually, if you name that trait to its moral conclusion, we got to start watching the apes and all this other, and squids and dolphins real close. Because eventually we're going to need dolphin jail to hold dolphins accountable for their moral actions. Because you can say they just don't understand. Well, guess what? If we all lived in the fucking woods, we may not understand it any better than dolphins anyways. Okay? That's the point. That's why veganism emerges from societies where shit's damn near perfect. Like societies where you're struggling and grinding every day, you don't find so much veganism. I mean, unless the diet for the area, is causing that. And even that wouldn't be veganism. That would just be preference in diet. Environmental preference of diet. Anyway, let's move on. So, you don't initiate conditions until a moral contract, which isn't proof, it's just pure opinion. If human animals do in fact meet some trait-based bar, whatever it is, you can name anything you want, I'm fine with it, to make a hunter bad and a cat who's playing with a mouse or less intelligent prey not bad, if a trait exists to elevate humans to honor a moral contract, it almost certainly couldn't apply to all humans. So you're saying humans have this weight, but at what age do humans have it? And again, if you're just assuming all humans, because they're more complex, have the intelligence to feel the moral weight to enter this contract. And I keep saying this contract is a subjective thing. When you feel like it's bad to hurt whatever animal you want to arbitrarily classify, that's when you feel the duty to stop doing it. Okay? That's the whole point. All right? It almost certainly wouldn't apply to all humans. A misinterpretation of intelligence leads humans to believe that because they seem on average more capable of understanding things like moral weight, that leads to a contract. But the average human, we say, understands right or wrong more than animals. But like as a primitive, like, no, we just know right and wrong is a primitive thing. You're getting close to claiming there's an objective moral law. I don't think humans know like right and wrong is an objective thing, because you can find humans justifying everything. Okay? It's about experiential it's about relating to experiential beings and then assigning them arbitrary moral value. And you can take that away just like you give it to people. And that's the point. That's what we see in society. I'm sorry, my synth wave is cut off here. Now, we're almost there, guys. I'm sorry. This has been ranty and I've been a little off track. But again, I've been really trying to find the time to do this, and I didn't want to keep pushing it off. And it doesn't have to be perfect, because we can do this again. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can say, hey, you totally fucked this up, and I'll get back to you. Anyways, so now where are we at now that I'm just rambling here? In the contract, okay. Now, just because we think humans are more capable of understanding things doesn't mean they do as a primitive. Doesn't mean they feel moral weight to not harm other experiencing beings. Nature and nurture doesn't matter. I'm just repeating myself over and over now. We confuse complexity with hierarchy. But here's a little thought experiment. We say humans have the moral weight because we're the most intelligent. But if a crazy advanced alien race came down and they said, hey, no, you guys are apes, okay? We eat every animal that doesn't have faster than light travel. Like, if you don't have faster than light travel, you don't meet the experiential complexity and intelligence bar to get the moral contract, and so we eat you. Would that make it wrong? Like, does that scale it up? And now, oh yeah, we are just dumb monkeys. What if every other planet in the entire universe with life was way smarter than humans? Would that mean we don't have moral weight? Because that's what we're saying about less intelligent animals. We're saying, oh, you don't meet this arbitrary bar that we've based on people, so you don't have a moral weight, but humans do. And I get it, feels good to just say we shouldn't kill anything and everything should live forever and we should never go to war and nobody should ever die of anything. I get that feels good. I'm describing reality here though. Okay, and so if those aliens come down and say, you don't have faster than light, we're going to eat you and the monkeys and the dogs and everything else y'all all eat, because we're doing the same thing you do. We're arbitrarily assigning moral categories. Would that make it right or not? You know what I'm saying? Anyways, I say in existential logicism, we say it still wouldn't be right because it's just wrong to hurt experiencing beings. And the more you harm them and the more indifferent you are to that suffering, the more broken you are. All the way to, if you enjoy harming other experiencing beings, we can tell you're fucked and that you're like a psychopath, okay? So you go from psychopath, I enjoy hurting experiencing beings because I know it hurts them. So you do have the understanding. You have gained the experiential and identifying understanding, but you want to harm them. That's a totally broken moral compass. You're a psychopath. But then we go all the way to, I love my kids and my family, but I'm just indifferent to this crazy amount of suffering because I've just justified it in my head. Like, we got to get people around to understanding so they feel moral weight, so that we can create off-ramps for people to take. That's what deterministic moral forces is about. Not saying you should do this because it's right or wrong, but saying people will predictably do this or that, and we can make upstream changes to help experiential beings suffer less. Okay, and like how to do that perfectly is a whole other question. I'm trying to lay foundations here, okay? So, anyways, that's just a little thought experiment. Like, if all of a sudden we were the primitive animal, would we still have the moral weight, or would we not? Like, these are the areas I think Name That Trait breaks down. Like, once you accept that, yeah, we're animals, there's no arbitrary weight, well, now Name That Trait has to name some arbitrary standard that humans meet. And if it's based on us being the bar, then what if we're not the most intelligent beings? Okay? And we agree with Name the Trait that it's just wrong to hurt experiencing beings. I want to make that clear. That's where Name the Trait and spectrum of consciousness and existential logicism and deterministic morality agree. Is, yeah, we want to reduce suffering. Same thing with moral realism. I agree with people like T-Jump and with people like Sam Harris. We want to reduce suffering. The question is, how do we do it, and how do we understand that suffering in a frame that helps us create that kind of change? Okay, so we covered that. So, in other words, existential logicism says the trait is being an animal, so there's no moral contract. There's only the creating the knowledge so that people identify with these experiencing beings and they don't want to harm them. That's how you do this stuff. I don't know what's going on here. I'm sorry. Uno second here. Okay. Now, without the experiential understanding followed by a felt duty to change, due to the many pressures on a being at any given time, there's never a pressure to change, thus no contract arises. There's no objective morality. There's no moral contract that actually exists because there's no objective morality. So we're basing it on arbitrary things. But there is one thing that we can grasp onto, see the epistemic refutation paradox, is that we experience, okay? And so that's what we're using. We're saying, okay, we understand the identification with primitive experiences, with other beings, is what creates the internal duty to not harm them. And we already feel that with people because it's easy to identify. We just have to create that with more categories of experiential beings. Okay? So, existential logicism says create societal pressure, aka duty through understanding, not demonizing humans who are animals for being animals ultimately. Okay? Nature and nurture, two factors. It doesn't matter which one makes you not capable of understanding. You either understand and feel the internal duty or you don't. Okay? So, let me just touch on one other thing here, okay? So an example of where this indifference to animal suffering creates downstream societal breakdowns, because one might say if farms are okay, then factory farms are okay because it's still killing. But the thing is, the farm is a symbiotic relationship, okay? The farmer's going to put in time. The cows are going to get safety. Every now and then the cow's going to die. The chickens are going to have the eggs taken. But there's a symbiotic relationship, and if you pervert and take advantage of any aspect, it breaks down, and then you can see a collapse in other areas, maybe a complete collapse. And the same's true for society. If we don't respect all the aspects of society, that's where you get this indifference. And it's even worse for us because the farm analogy doesn't have the overlord who's looking to exploit that weakness, okay? So the idea is we want to go back to more symbiotic relationships and not these like sort of disgusting consumer-based relationships with the world. But the idea is the cow may have to die on the farm, but the farmer's going to die maybe working out there. And humans in society have to work jobs that are going to give them cancer. And there's dangerous jobs that people have to work where they die. And some people have to go to war. And so the idea is the cow doesn't go to war and it doesn't work a job and it doesn't do that stuff. But what it does do is every once in a while, one of the cows on the farm has to get slaughtered so the farmer can eat. Is it ideal? No. It's also not ideal when a coal miner dies. And the question is, how do we make it better? You get it? Because there's like, that's what just doesn't make sense to me, is why we're just not constantly asking this question. Oh, people are dying in this way. How do we prevent it? Oh, you're taking rights and freedoms away from people. How do you justify doing that if you're not directly stopping harm? And it's like our framing of society is just, it's all out of whack. And I don't have the perfect answers for you right here today, because this video is more specific than that. But the idea is, then you go from the farm and you go to factory farming. And what you have is a complete exploitation of the resource and a disconnect and an indifference from society. So you don't have a cow dying every now and then as a byproduct of the symbiotic relationship we're all living on Earth, where everybody has to make some kind of sacrifice and some people have to make some more sacrifices than other. You have just a total disconnect and a complete consumer mindset where you just overconsume and overconsume and overconsume. And what do? You get gluttony, and you get mentally lazy societies. Like, and that's the point, is it's not just that killing animals is bad, it's that becoming indifferent to the suffering of experiencing beings leads to societies that will just tolerate all types of horrible shit. Only limited by your imagination and your ability to declassify experiencing beings out of your category of protected moral, out of your protected moral category. So the very last thing I want to say is about pets. Use primitives to communicate with your